So can I first thank you ever so much for your welcome. It's been a little while. The last time I was here was 2014. And once again, thank you, Michal, for inviting me and for all your hard work, and Matilda's in the background and all the rest of the team in making this festival in such a hard time. I mean, my goodness, you know, what have we all been through in this last year? But we're all here still making art, and this is what I wanted to talk about. My theme is permanent, impermanent, and it's also related to my performance that I did yesterday. But my performance I did yesterday, My Cup Runneth Over, wasn't just what happened in the iron pour. It was what happened this week, making the sculpture, making the mold with everyone, meeting all of you, and doing something that shares story, shares experience, and shares knowledge. So I'm going to share some stories of some of the work that I've made that's been mainly temporary work. But first, I just wanted to introduce you to my first experience of iron casting at the Bullpen Foundry in Oxford with Wes and Helen Jacobs. And I took a sewing machine there because I was a textile artist. So that's my background. And there I met Casey Westbrook. And we have done several public iron pours together. And I'm just going through these because these are the impermanent parts of the process. Many of you who've been involved with fine art casting in iron know that the actual casting of iron is almost like a performance. Well, it is a performance, but it's the moment that we experience that most of the public don't experience. And it's the memories that we carry from these moments that are so important for us as artists. And the work that I made as this performance yesterday, My Cup Runneth Over, was in memory of Andrew Griffiths from Winchester School of Art, and also an amazing tutor who was a mentor to me. And I'll share a little bit about my experience of meeting him for the first time. And Casey Westbrook. So Andrew died last year, and Casey died in 2018. And they're both quite significant figures for me in the sculpture community, and particularly the fine art casting of cast iron and bronze. And it was in 2010 that Casey invited me to be involved with an iron pour for Matthew Barney, a sculptor in the US. And this was the largest thing I've ever been involved in, a 25-ton iron pour. And it was just such an amazing experience. But what was fascinating was seeing Matthew Barney's process. So the budget, I can't really tell you what the budget was. I know it was in its millions. But we were involved in this part of a process. And Matthew Barney's a very interesting artist for me because he calls himself a sculptor, but he does performance work and he makes these incredible films. So he's a performance artist and a maker, and he's a filmmaker. And it just really woke up my mind to what this thing is that we do, this making of metal, but actually the process of making it is the art as much as the actual cast objects at the end. So this is one of the castings, but equally he displayed the well that was above the casting. And then in 2012, I was commissioned to do a piece for the Olympics, and this was a light installation using no metal at all. This is just chalk, drilled chalk, and porcelain leaves. And this is why I wanted to kind of share these stories. This is a work that only lasted 2 weeks. Thousands of people saw it. And I want to just share with you this thing about permanence, impermanence. Permanent work is the work that leaves a permanent impression in someone's mind. And I met someone in this installation who, she came up to me crying because she had 2 parents experiencing dementia. And she said, for 2 hours, I have forgotten about my parents and I've had a moment of peace. And I just woke up again to this process of making a work that leaves a long-lasting impression on someone. Here's some more details of that work. And then we made a piece for a tramway museum, and this was a memorial to a lot of my work. It seems to be quite memorial. It's one of those things that comes. It was about the work that was happening in the First World War on the tramways, and memories of the men and women that worked, particularly women who worked on the tramways during the First World War. And we had a lot of conflict in making this piece. So although it's metal, we didn't make it. We were going to process, we were going to actually cast the work. And the engineer that we were talking to about the process, he said, you don't need to do that, come with me. And he took me up to his shed where they stored all the materials for the Trwałe Museum. And they had these long lengths of 3-meter track. And it was about representing figures. And he said, there's your figures, there they are. So then the work was about installing these large pieces of track in the landscape. And people weren't sure that it was genuinely a piece of art because it was literally a piece of track standing in the ground. And particularly the chairman of the museum was very cynical. And we did a talk. We walked around and showed them the work. And during that walk, he and his wife came up to me in tears again. I try not to make people cry too much. But he and his wife suddenly understood the work. And it made a massive impact on them. They suddenly connected with these pieces of track they'd seen for years in their museum. They saw them as figures, soldiers coming back from war. And then this brings me to a sound piece, which I haven't got the sound for, I'm afraid. But that's so I can talk to you, because it's really loud. And this was, for me, quite a lovely piece. I haven't done a lot with sound work, but it was part of an installation. It's called Breathe. And it was this idea of a living, breathing machine. Again, I'm very interested in the machines that process and make things. And I went to a steam fair when I was a child and had strong memories of the sounds and smells of steam and the burning of coke, which connects very well with cast iron, obviously. So I made these recordings of the steam engines very close up and then put this pulsing light in that was changing gently from red to dark at the same pace as your breath. And that was only up for 2 weeks. But again, I had one of the most impacting conversations with someone where they came up to me and strangely thanked me for visualizing a panic attack. And they were there with their father, and they were in this installation that gradually built up into this intense sound. And she had to come out the first time she heard it. But she was able to say to her dad, that's what my panic attacks feel like. And I think this is what we do when we make art. We make things that challenge people and get people to think about their life, their human condition. And you won't always know what you're making. You might know why you're making it, but you won't know what you're making until someone else tells you. So you make the thing you intend to make, but everyone else has a different interpretation. And that's a powerful thing. So this piece is very personal, and obviously you can see the theme. I'm wearing my costume to sort of share it. This was a work called In My Father's House, and this is the apron I'm wearing. This is a detail from it. And 3 of us, more detail, you can see the names of my father, grandfathers, and at the bottom I've put son of Andrew Griffiths, because for me, he was a father to me creatively. And that's partly why I made this work this week, to celebrate that and remember him. But we made these booths and we wore these aprons that represented the work of our fathers. And then we asked people to share their story about fathers. They'd come up to us and say, so what are you doing? Why are you... Oh, let me just get my notes, sorry. Sorry. Why are you dressed like this? And we'd say, well, we're asking a question. What is a father? And this one was, you can see the splash of water from the Venetian river there on the lens. But I had to use this one because it's the only shot we have of these 3 girls. Now, this was a temporary installation. We literally carried those booths with us around Venice, opened them up and talked to people. There was no recording of the conversation. There was no filming. There was just photography, still photography, and a short films from a distance. So those conversations, that's where I believe the work was. That's where the art was. Was it in the costume? Was it in the making of the booths? I don't still know the answer. I think this is what I find very interesting. But what I do know is that moment was very powerful. and impacting for those girls. I remember them because they were going to college and they saw me and they said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And then they said, "Oh no, we have to go to college," and they ran off. And then they came back later. And I remember very, very strongly, they came to me and said, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm asking, what is a father?" And all three of them stepped back, quite a distance, because there was this sudden realization that this was a challenging subject for them. And we had quite a tearful conversation because two of them were estranged from their fathers and one of them had lost a father. And so the work, my comments on fathers, my feeling about fathers was challenging them, but then the conversation was very beautiful and very intimate. And I know that the work lives in their memory. So this is what I'm driving at in my permanent, impermanent thinking, is that actually the permanent works that we make, I believe it's about the memory of those permanent works. So this is a piece called Reveal, Conceal. It was a work made with a group of young people involved in knife crime in the UK, which is a big subject for us at the moment. And there was this young man who made a piece here, and I've highlighted it so you can see. I asked all of them to make a little plaque that we would then cast, and I wanted them to find a word, a positive word that represented who they were. And this young man, he tried 32 times to find that word. He came to all my sessions, all my workshops I did. He was there every time. And every time he did a word, he used letterpress into the clay, and every time he rubbed it out. Every time he couldn't commit to this word. So actually, he has 32 words that are good words for him. Even though it took him all that time, he still didn't leave a natural word on that piece. But where is his story in that piece? I know it, now you know it. And so many of the things that we make, they have hidden stories. And so the permanent art, the sculpture, yeah, it's a permanent sculpture, and people can look at it, and they might get an interpretation. But actually, is it more important how you make it, who you make it with, who it's for, and how permanent that work then becomes for those that experience it? So this brings me to the most recent work, which I installed only the week before I came here. This is a work in Camberley, and it started out here with our lovely friends at West Wales. So I wanted to go and cast with Andy and his crew, and we did a bronze pour. And here's some of the bronze from that casting. And it's an artwork called Streets of Gold. And it took 2 years to install because, of course, it was for the council when it was a high street installation. But it literally happened before I arrived here. We installed the last pieces. And for me, this piece is really powerful because it's this thing of memories again. We spent about 6 months with local people, talking to them about their memories of this place, this town that they live in. And Camberley's not a particularly special town for me, for the local people. It became special. And we had these conversations, we made these recordings, and then we started to take the phrases that were said and create these small broken poetry pieces that would be placed around the high street. And the idea was, go back because, I haven't got any more of those, sorry. The idea was that you would explore the high street and discover them in the ground. And then you could take those phrases and create your own memories of the place. And even the week before last, when we were starting to install, one lady came up to me and she said, where's the one about Kate? Where's the one that says Camberley Kate? And I said, you mean this one? You mean seeing Kate and her dogs? And she said, no, there's one called Camberley Kate. And I said, well, I didn't cast one called Camberley Kate. She said, no, I've seen it. Someone told me I must come and find it. I said, but there's this one, but there isn't the one you want. And I thought it was amazing because she was insistent to me that this object that she believed was in the high street. It wasn't there. But this story for the local people is really strong and powerful. And I encourage you when I've finished and when you have some time to explore Camberley Kate. She's an amazing woman. And even in making this work, I found out about a lady who had about 15 dogs, and she looked after these dogs, and she had a wheelbarrow that she handmade that she'd walk her poor dogs around the streets of Camberley with. And everyone in the town knows of her. She's this amazing character, unfortunately also now gone. But again, these memories, they're really powerful and really strong, and they trigger in people emotions and things that are permanent, that stay, into much later life. So, yeah, here's us doing our iron pour. This is the last time I poured with Andy, and so Streets of Gold is like a memorial to him for us, back at home, which is lovely. And I think the other thing to say about it was when I was there with him, when we found out he was dying, I went to visit, and I said, Andy, I'm going to put your name on my apron because you've been a father to me. And the reason I say that is because, again, it wasn't about his sculpture. He's a sculptor. He's an amazing sculptor, or was an amazing sculptor. He was an amazing performer, both on the poor floor and in his singing, which was amazing, with punk bands. Incredible man. And I loved what he made, but actually the thing that I'll never forget, and the thing that made me make this work for my performance yesterday, was I walked into his studio, which was in his loft in his house when I first met him. And looking around, I saw these large jars full of Kinder Surprise toys. And then he had all his patterns he was making for bronzes or whatever he was doing, bits of old scrappy materials. But he had all these pots of toys. And I have pots of toys and bits of bark and old rusty nails and all sorts of weird random things in my studio. And I'm sure many of you who make things do that as well. And a lot of times, I'm a man getting on in my years now. I have, children, and I still have to make work to live. And sometimes I question, as an artist, can I justify what I do? Is it right for, a grown man to be playing with materials and, playing with toys even? And when I walked into his studio, I said, Andrew, I feel like I've come home. I said, I feel validated by being in your studio. And so for me, he kind of mentored me and showed me and encouraged me that it's okay. It's actually all right to be slightly dysfunctional and weird and have all these things. But it's not right because I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. That is great. It's right because, as I've demonstrated with the works I've shown you, the work that I have made, for me, it's been a privilege. I've heard the stories of the effects of that work. And if you can make a piece of work that moves someone, that changes the way they feel, then probably you'll leave a lasting memory in their minds that will go on until the day they die. And that is a powerful thing. Only Tuesday of this week, I was privileged to go and see your museum, the Four Domes, and I saw an artwork. I forget the name of the artist, but it was an artwork about her, and it was I never got touched by my father like this, or I can't remember the title fully, but it's a film of her and her father with their eyes closed, touching each other's faces. And I was really affected by that because I have an 8-year-old daughter, and when I wake up in the morning, it's because she is laying next to me, stroking my face and picking my eyelids. And she does it pretty much every morning. And so this work I saw, suddenly I was in Wrocław on a conference with a festival happening, and I was visiting some art, some contemporary art in Poland, and suddenly I was that older man, and there was my daughter. And I could imagine myself being in my 60s or 70s, and my daughter still picking my eyelids. I forgot to get her name, sorry. So thank you, whoever you are. I photographed the work because it was just so lovely. And so just in finishing, I wanted to share this last story because this is lovely. It's almost come full circle with my process. I'm currently working on a very large commission in London in a place called Thamesmead that has a long history. I'm sure some of you have seen a film called Clockwork Orange, and a lot of the scenes were filmed there. So it's got a slightly notorious history, Thamesmead, and it's architecturally it's very utopian, but has now become quite dystopian. But what I discovered, so this is a visualization of a 23-meter high, fully operational hot air balloon that we are going to run above the landscape in London next year. It's the first time I've had to register a sculpture as an aircraft. So we've actually got a registration already for it, which is GFOEW, which is Fields of Everywhen. And this is, again, about capturing people's stories. And the concept is that we are gathering people's filmed stories, written stories, and then we're provoking the community through workshops to create a series of embroideries which share those stories. And then we will digitize them and print them onto 800 meters of fabric. So it's like a very long, long version of the Bayeux Tapestry for the local people, and then inflate it. But in doing it, I put up a post on Facebook about the commission, and Coral contacted me. So many of you have met her. She was at a conference maybe 4 years ago? 2 years ago, was it? Yeah, 2 years ago. And Coral I've met through the conferences and at Sloss and various other places. She's another fine sculptor who works in hot metal, cast iron, and also other materials. And she said, Jono, she said, this is amazing. She said, I grew up in Thamesmead. And suddenly she told me her story. And so I said, listen, I must record you. So this is online, you'll be able to see this. But what she shared was this story. And two of the artists that we're working with some students from the Royal College. And they did a painting of her story. And so, glasses off. She learned how to canoe on this lake in Thamesmead where we're going to be making this work. And she talked about the memory of being with her friend when she was a student and sitting in their bedroom and smelling the smell of wet concrete because it was a brand new building. And the last thing I wanted to say, because I've literally got no minutes left, is that all this stuff that we do, all the stuff that you're doing, everything that you make, it is hard won if it's worth doing. And that phrase, I don't know if you're familiar with hard won, but in England we say if something's hard won, that you managed to achieve it, but it was very difficult. And so I challenge you with the things that you make, try and do things that are challenging for you. And if you do, if they challenge you, not just physically, but emotionally, if they engage you in your thinking and in your feelings, then when you make something, it will have that invested in it and it will leave a lasting impression. And that impermanent thought can become permanent. That's me, and that's my site. Thank you for your time.